The sunny afternoon was supposed to be simple and serene. Nothing more than a quiet outing in the park for Gabrielle and her energetic young niece, Aria. They'd only just settled onto a weathered wooden bench, sharing a laugh about one of Aria's latest school antics when Gabrielle noticed him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and clad in a police officer's uniform, Officer Marcus Crane. His piercing gaze was locked on her from across the park, filled with something unmistakably cold and hostile. Marcus didn't approach immediately. Instead, he stood at a distance, his eyes narrowing each time he noticed Gabrielle's smile. His judgment seemed to build a silent, prejudiced story about her, one that could not have been further from the truth. As Aria skipped toward the swings, her laughter ringing in the air, Gabrielle felt the man's presence grow heavier, a dark cloud over an otherwise bright day. Without warning, Marcus strode across the grass, his boots crunching with purpose. In a few quick steps, he closed the distance, standing far too close. His imposing frame cast a shadow that enveloped Gabrielle and Aria. His cold, unyielding stare bore into her, and when he finally spoke, his words were sharp, laced with disdain. "Is there a reason you're here?" he asked, his tone biting. "Disturbing the peace?" Gabrielle blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me," she replied, her voice calm but firm. Marcus's lips curled into a sneer. "Maybe you should find somewhere else to be," he said, his tone heavy with insinuation. "Somewhere you actually belong?" Aria tugged at Gabrielle's hand, her small face crinkling with confusion and fear. Gabrielle squeezed her niece's hand reassuringly, her composure steady, though anger simmered beneath her calm exterior. "We're here like everyone else," Gabrielle said evenly, "just spending the afternoon together." Marcus's scoff was audible, his arrogance palpable. "You people always think you're above the rules, don't you? This park isn't for you." Gabrielle's patience thinned as Aria shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Officer," she said, her voice measured, "I'm teaching my niece that everyone has a right to be here and to be treated with respect." Marcus leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper. "Respect? That's earned, not given, especially for people like you." Gabrielle's blood ran cold at the insult, but her resolve only hardened. Beneath her calm exterior, she carried a badge of her own, one that signified a level of authority Marcus couldn't begin to imagine. She decided to let him keep digging his own grave. Marcus's frustration mounted as Gabrielle stood unwavering. His hand twitched, his arrogance faltering as he saw no fear in her eyes. "What's the matter?" he taunted. "Got nothing to say now? Maybe you're finally realizing you're out of place." Gabrielle's heart pounded, but she remained calm. Her fingers tightened around Aria's hand. "We're not going anywhere," she said firmly. "And you're not scaring us." The officer's smirk faltered briefly, replaced by a flicker of doubt, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. He doubled down instead, grabbing Gabrielle's arm. His grip was harsh, painful, and full of unspoken threat. "Maybe a night in a cell will remind you where you belong," he spat. Gabrielle's anger ignited, but her training kicked in. She steadied her breath, her voice sharp and controlled. "Do you really think you can treat people this way? Abuse your power just because you think no one will stand up to you?" For the first time, Marcus hesitated. The shift in her tone, the confidence she exuded, made him falter. "I can do whatever I want," he retorted, though his grip loosened slightly. "I'm the law here." Gabrielle allowed the faintest hint of a smirk to cross her lips. "No, you're not. And you're about to find out just how wrong you are." In a single calculated move, Gabrielle stepped forward, her badge flashing in the sunlight. The FBI insignia gleamed, unmistakable. Marcus's face blanched as the weight of his miscalculation hit him like a tidal wave. Your FBI?" he stammered, his arrogance dissolving into disbelief. Gabrielle's voice was steady, her gaze unyielding. "That's right, Officer Crane. And I've been watching you. The people you intimidate, the power you abuse, it all ends today." Marcus stepped back, his face a mixture of panic and fury. "You can't do this," he muttered. "It's your word against mine." Gabrielle's smirk widened slightly. "Actually, I've documented everything. There are witnesses. Complaints filed. You've left a trail of evidence. Officer. And now it's time to face the consequences. As the confrontation unfolded, a small crowd began to gather. Drawn by the tension and the escalating exchange, parents whispered among themselves, pulling their children closer. Some reached for their phones, recording the scene. Gabrielle's calm, authoritative demeanor seemed to command the attention of everyone nearby, even as Marcus's face turned a deeper shade of red. "This isn't over," Marcus spat, his voice low but trembling with barely concealed rage. "You think you can embarrass me like this?" Gabrielle didn't flinch. "Embarrassment is the least of your worries," she said. "You've crossed a line, Officer Crane. And trust me, the law has a way of catching up with people like you." Arya, still clutching her aunt's hand, looked up with wide eyes. "Aunt Gabby," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Are we in trouble?" Gabrielle knelt down to her niece's level, her expression softening as she gently brushed a strand of hair from Arya's face. "No, sweetheart," she said soothingly. "We're not in trouble. We're doing what's right." The weight of the moment wasn't lost on Gabrielle. She knew that this wasn't just about her, or even about Marcus Crane. It was about setting an example for Arya and for everyone watching. It was about showing that standing up to injustice, no matter how intimidating, was always worth it. As Marcus finally stormed off, muttering under his breath, Gabrielle stood tall, her hand firmly holding Arya's. The small crowd began to disperse, murmurs of support and curiosity filling the air. One woman, a mother with 2 young children, approached Gabrielle hesitantly. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for standing up to him. It's about time someone did." Gabrielle offered a small, grateful smile. "We all deserve to feel safe," she replied simply. The rest of the afternoon passed with a lingering tension. Gabrielle remained vigilant, her eyes scanning the park for any sign of Marcus. Arya played with the other children, her laughter gradually returning as the fear faded. But Gabrielle couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. When they finally left the park and returned to the car, Gabrielle's phone buzzed with a message from a colleague. It was a simple update, but it carried the weight of validation. "Crane's record is under review. We've got your back." Gabrielle exhaled slowly, a sense of relief washing over her. The battle wasn't over, but she knew she wasn't fighting it alone. And as she looked at Arya, now dozing peacefully in the back seat, she felt a renewed determination to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for every person who'd ever been made to feel small or powerless. The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, statements, and investigations. Gabrielle's role as a federal agent gave her access to resources and allies that many others didn't have, and she used them to ensure that Marcus Crane's actions were thoroughly examined. Witnesses came forward, each story painting a clearer picture of a man who had long misused his authority. Marcus, meanwhile, found himself at the center of a storm he couldn't control. His superiors placed him on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the investigation, and whispers of his misconduct spread through the department like wildfire. He spent his days pacing his small apartment, his mind racing with fear and anger. For Gabrielle, the confrontation had sparked something deeper. She began receiving messages from people in the community, stories of their own encounters with officers like Marcus. Some were heartbreaking, others infuriating, but all of them reinforced the importance of holding those in power accountable. One evening, Gabrielle sat down with Arya to talk about what had happened. "Do you remember what I told you at the park?" she asked gently. Arya nodded. "You said everyone has a right to be treated with respect." Gabrielle smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "That's right, sweetheart. And that's why we stand up to people who try to take that away from others." As the weeks passed, the investigation into Marcus Crane's conduct concluded. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was formally dismissed from the force. The news sent ripples through the community, sparking both outrage and relief. For Gabrielle, it was a bittersweet victory. She'd achieved justice, but the cost of the battle weighed heavily on her. Months later, Gabrielle and Arya returned to the park. The memories of that tense afternoon lingered, but the atmosphere felt lighter, freer. As Arya ran toward the swings, Gabrielle noticed a small group of children playing nearby. Among them was a boy who'd been too scared to join in before, his mother watching with a smile of quiet gratitude. Gabrielle took a deep breath, the cool breeze carrying with it a sense of hope. She'd fought a difficult battle, but the ripple effects of her actions were undeniable. And as she watched Arya laugh and play, Gabrielle knew that the fight for justice was always worth it, for the present and for the future.